What is good, everybody? It's Reed and welcome back to another tutorial. Today we got a super exciting video. This is one of my favorites that I'm looking forward to. We're going to be going over the second deal, specifically the strike second deal, because push off is useless. Anyway, I'll get into that. But we'll be going over the strike second deal. False dealing is one of my favorite things. It's what I work on all the time. I love false dealing. Have the Madison dealers out for the occasion, of course. So the second deal, a absolutely amazing move. There's so much you can do with the second deal. A lot of people do the second deal wrong or teach the second deal wrong, in my opinion. No, it's wrong. So I'm going to try to teach the way that I think it should be done to best mimic the fair deal. And really, that's what you're going for with any kind of false dealing, is to mimic your fair deal. There's no reason to alter your dealing from your fair deal, right? You might need to alter your fair deal to be more similar to your false deals, but we'll get into that in a bit. Anyway, the second deal is a super powerful move, a lot of fun. Not too difficult, I would say, especially when it comes to false deals. I would say it's probably the easiest. I'm very excited to, give you my thoughts on the second deal, show you how I second deal, and then give you all kinds of ideas of things you can do with the second deal. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into it. All right, so time for a quick demonstration on the second deal. So the top card is going to be the Jack of Hearts. Watch. I'll just deal down a bunch of cards here. And you'll actually see how the Jack of Hearts is still on the top of the deck. So let me deal it down for real. Hold on. Just kidding. No, it's still on the top of the deck. All right, watch. I'll do it really slow. Watch. I'm pushing it over and taking it down, okay? Now it's still on top of the deck. Anyway, the point is, no matter how many cards off the top that I deal, the Jack of Hearts just somehow stays on the top of the deck. All right, so time for some exposure on the second deal. Here is my favorite way to expose it. All right, Jack of Hearts on top of the deck, but I'll leave it face up this time and maybe you'll get an idea of what's going on. And that is the second deal. All right, so time for the breakdown. There's a few things I wanted to say before I get too much into it. I kind of made a claim at the beginning that the push-off is useless. Now, it's not useless, okay? I was exaggerating a little bit. The push-off can possibly be the cleanest second deal in terms of if you're looking at it like this, it looks really good, right? If you're kind of eyeballing it from straight on top of the deck, if you're kind of dealing with your wrist pointed this way, right? The push-off can look really nice. But here's the thing. What did I say the most important thing was when it comes to false dealing? That is to mimic your fair deal. So the problem with the push-off is it doesn't mimic your fair deal, okay? In a fair deal, let's think about this. The thumb is roughly in the center of the pack, maybe a little bit more to the left, and you're pushing off, taking a card and putting it down. With the push off, you need this thumb to be on the outer corner so that you can push off the two cards, or three if you're not so good at it like me. Now, obviously, if you're fair dealing and then you want to go and do a second deal, the thumb's going to have to come back here and push. And now that might not seem like a big deal, but when you're trying to make your deception as invisible as possible, to do these kind of weird actions that aren't totally natural is just one extra thing that is unnecessary. So the push-off is just obsolete to the strike second deal. So in the push-off, you're pushing off two cards and then you're taking the one underneath. Now, like I said, if you're Richard Turner and you can do it like him, well, good on you, and it's an amazing, to show off. But it still doesn't quite mimic your fair deal because mainly of where that thumb position is going to be. In the strike, all we're doing is pushing over the first card, striking the second card, and pulling it out. Basically, we get to perfectly mimic our fair deal. So with this left hand, the thumb's pushing off just like you would in a fair deal. Same spot, same distance, everything. So now when it comes to the strike second deal, I also said that it is taught wrong a lot. And here's the reason. Let's see if you guys can tell what's wrong with this. And again, I don't do it this way, so it's not going to look the greatest, but I'll try to mimic what a lot of people teach. Anyway, that wasn't the greatest. Obviously, I don't do it that way, but most people are trying to teach you to do this. Just make the smallest little brief, okay? So a brief is the area in the bottom card. So here's the top card. So it's the area of the second card that you basically expose. So this would be a small brief and this would be a large brief, right? People are so obsessed with getting the smallest brief possible, right? So you don't even see the brief. So you just come in here and it looks like the cards are coming out of nowhere. Now, well, it can look very cool, you know, to do it, and it just kind of looks like the cards are just kind of coming out of nowhere. Yeah, it's cool, but once again, it doesn't mimic your fair deal, 1, and 2, it's very unnecessary. It's a ton of practice and very hard for no reason. But like I said, so many people, especially on YouTube, are trying to teach you to have this tiny little brief. And I see videos on Instagram and stuff of people second dealing with the tiny brief. And yeah, it looks super cool when they're doing a bunch of second deals in a row and it looks clean. But when you're switching between fair deals and second deals, it's not gonna look exactly the same. And I'll explain why in a minute. But you know, you always see people freaking out over this tiny brief. And it's like, I mean, besides it looking cool, it's not great for practical use. The size of the brief really doesn't matter. And making it bigger just makes your job a lot easier, and it doesn't make it more exposed. And here's why. If we think about our fair deal once again, do this right now. Pick up a deck and push over a card like you're in a fair deal. I'm gonna guess most of you are gonna be in this range, somewhere around here. You don't deal a card like this. You don't push it off a millimeter and then pull it down. All right, that's not how people deal. People deal casually. They push the card off far and they deal. So that is exactly what you should do with the second deal. That is why it doesn't make sense to do these tiny briefs, because that's not how a regular person fair deals, right? We're pushing off a lot. Now, like I said, also, it's just making it hard for no reason. Now let's kind of get into the strike second deal, the way I do it and how it should be taught, okay? So we're gonna hold the cards in a regular mechanics grip. Now, I've touched on this before. My mechanics grip, I have 2 fingers in the front. If you're interested in false dealing and really mastering it, I would say switch to this grip. And the reason for that is it's very, very helpful with bottom dealing and Greek dealing and that sort of thing. It's very, very hard to bottom deal, and it's not gonna ever look right if you're holding it in a regular mechanics grip. But for the second deal, feel free to hold it in a regular mechanics grip, as long as that's the same as your fair deal. So whatever your fair deal grip is, hold it in that. But if you want to be able to, you know, move on to the bottom deal one day, I'd recommend switching to this. So quickly, the only difference is the middle finger about that joint there is going to be right on the corner of the deck. Okay, so right here. And the deck, instead of sitting, you know, far back in the palm, is going to try to be a little bit more at the fingertips. Okay, and then this finger, the index, is just gonna kind of fall naturally over the front of the deck. These 2 fingers on the side, and you just kind of find that kind of comfortable position for you. So it's very similar. This finger is just right on the corner instead, in case you guys want to start working on that. Again, important thing about grip is that it matches your fair deal. So pick up the cards like you're about to deal, and that should be basically the way you hold it. So what you're doing is we're pushing off like we're gonna fair deal. Again, start fair dealing, okay? And then just stop right here. Start fair dealing and stop, and don't pull the card away. So this is what you want to do for your second deal. Push the card off just like that. Exactly how you would your fair deal. Now you're going to come in. Normally we're grabbing the card between our middle finger and thumb. Pretty much that's what generally most people do. Might help a little bit with the index underneath. And you're just grabbing like this. All right? With the second deal, the only difference we're making is a slight adjustment of where this hand's coming. Instead of coming here, the thumb at least is moving up to this corner as it comes in. So instead of gripping here, the thumb is moving up here. These fingers don't really go anywhere. You just want to kind of make them come in naturally as you would grabbing this card, but they just kind of come in. Now the thumb is making contact. Leave this card face up so you guys can see. The thumb is making contact with that second card in that brief, applying a little bit of pressure, pulling it out. The second it clears the deck, the other fingers are coming underneath to grip it as you would a regular card. They're pulling it out. As they pull out, the thumb on the left hand is retracting this card back square with the deck, okay? So slowly. So one thing when you guys are trying to learn from a video, sometimes the teacher, including myself, might forget to mention a small thing that you're wondering about, like finger position or something. If you watch the video, you can just tell yourself, you know, where that finger should be. If you're wondering, oh, what's he doing with his ring finger when he does this? You know, obviously I didn't say that, but if you watch, you can see exactly what I'm doing. In this case, nothing. But that's just a good tip when you're trying to learn sleights on videos. If you want to learn something, just really carefully analyze the video and you can pretty much figure out exactly what they're doing. Let's go over that one more time. So regular dealer's grip, push over exactly like we were fair dealing, but instead of grabbing here, we're placing the thumb on this corner, putting a bit of pressure, and the second, like literally the second it starts to come over the edge, the other fingers are coming in to grab it, pulling out while this is retracting. Now, if you're wondering, I was making a big deal about the thumb position matching the fair deal. So you might be thinking, oh, well, this thumb position's not matching a fair deal, but here's the thing. Here I'm coming in for a fair deal, second deal, fair deal, second deal, fair deal, second deal. But realistically, when you grip it, you can pull either card from that fair deal position, right? If I'm in the fair deal, the tip of my thumb is kind of on the second dealing position, and I could pull that card out. So really, you don't need to really move it much, but it's just a little easier if you move more of the pad instead of the tip of your thumb up to there as you pull out. With this thumb, it's kind of in an idle hand, whereas this hand is moving, pulling away, so it's really instant. Whereas if you're doing push-offs, this thumb is going to constantly be out in this corner, so there'll be a constant discrepancy, whereas this one comes in and it's so quick when it takes away. Like I said, don't worry about that brief size, just do everything to match your fair deals. Okay, so how to cover the second deal. Obviously, if you're doing it this way, it's not that invisible, especially with a big brief, which I'm telling you guys is totally fine. So now we gotta, discuss how to cover that. So here's the answer. This. All your fair deals, the best way to cover them is to aim the cards at the eye line, right? I've talked about this in a lot of things. It can help with depth perception, it can help with all kinds of things, but in the case of the second deal, it helps cover that. So you don't need to, do a wrist kill where you're like turning your hand over. Just need to point the front of the deck roughly at eye line. What that's gonna do, watch, I'll do a second deal very slowly. You see the card come off the top. You can't really tell what card I'm taking. And now I've taken the card and it totally looks like the top card. All you see is a card come off, you see me grip something, and then you see it come out. Now, you don't need to deal like this. You don't need to do your second deals with this hand stationary up like this. When you're dealing, you wanna have a bit of a kind of a marriage of the hands coming together. This is kind of a Daniel Madison idea that he talks about a lot. You don't wanna be conducting a symphony when you're doing this, right? What you wanna be doing is just find something that's comfortable for you, but you don't want to make it too obvious. Your hands just kind of come apart and come together on every single deal. This is kind of implements the bigger action hides a smaller action idea. And if you guys aren't familiar with that, it's just saying that if you make a bigger action while doing a smaller action, it'll kind of conceal that. So it kind of does that, but it also creates kind of a rhythmic visual deception, I guess I would call it. It also allows this kind of nice effect where you see the top of the deck, just as the hands come together, you kind of don't see the top of the deck and it's pointing at your eye line, so we can get away with the deception, and then you see the top of the deck again. So fast, it looks like you've seen the top of the deck the whole time, right? It looks like the whole time I'm doing this, that you're seeing the top of the deck, even though for a very split second you're not, and that's when I execute the deception. So you need to practice first fair dealing this way, and then come in and start second dealing this way, right? So in terms of some subtleties on the second deal, the biggest subtlety is to mimic your fair deal, of course. So that's gonna come mainly with practice, and in the other uses and ideas, I'll get into some of the methods I use and some of the good ways to practice the second deal. But in terms of mimicking your fair deal, the things you wanna look at is grip. Make sure the grip in your hand doesn't change. Make sure the brief or how much you push over the card doesn't change. And then make sure how this hand is gripping the card doesn't change. So if it's thumb and middle finger for fair, it should be thumb and middle finger for second, right? So if I alternate doing fair deal, second deal, and I do it at kind of my regular speed, you shouldn't even see a difference, right? So fair, second, fair, second, fair, second, fair, second. So with that, literally the only difference is like a few millimeters that I'm moving this thumb, but in this action, you don't even see it. You want to keep in mind the sound. There's a very small sound difference, which is this card comes off and it's mostly silent, but this card comes out and you hear a little bit of a swoop because it's sandwiched between two cards. So how to counteract that basically is, instead of pulling this card off silently, just pull it off and drag it along the fingers on the side, right? So it comes, right? So I'm pulling it off and it makes a sound. Now when I do the second deal, it makes the same sound. So that's one of the things that's important with fair dealing. Oftentimes it's hard to get your fair or your false deals to match perfectly your fair deals. So you can start to change your fair deals to match your false deals. This is super great idea. So one thing's with sound. So now I always fair deal and I make that extra sound by literally just pulling the card down a little bit so that it rubs off these fingers and flicks a little bit when it comes off, and that'll totally hide your sound. That'll also hide your sound really well for bottom dealing. If there's any small actions when you guys are practicing that you notice look slightly different, it's probably easier to adjust your fair deal to match the false deal. And so you want to find that happy medium, right? Like I used to fair deal with this hand stationary, but then I started changing to a little bit of motion from both, and now I do that with every single false deal I do so that they really match really well. It's gonna take some work, you know, I won't lie. It was a big change, especially for me, to change this grip, and it took a lot of dedication and probably thousands of deals before I got really comfortable, but now this feels so awkward. It's that kind of dedication if you really want your deals to match perfectly. So the grip is one thing, but really the biggest thing is this kind of little marriage of the hands coming together, which is really going to help hide your false deals. And I would start practicing it as early as possible. You don't want to put it off too long so you develop the wrong kind of habits. So in terms of body language, like I was saying, this kind of bringing together of the hands, I'll just touch on a little bit more. It's like it's imagine you're conducting a symphony, but just a lot less exaggerated. So just looks really natural as it comes together, your hands, right? As you hit all these second deals. Okay, so it's just a very small motion. The hands come apart, come together. You don't want your dealing hand to be stationary while you deal, and you don't want your deck hand to be stationary when you deal. That little bit of motion will go so far in covering your false deals. So of course, be casual, be natural. This is super important with false deals. Make sure it mimics as best you can your fair deal. That's super important. And just work on that eye line thing. So every time, just before you pull the card out, the hands should meet with the deck pointing at the spectator's eye line as you pull down. And it'll give the effect that you never even hid the top of the deck from the spectator, even though you did. It'll just really help hide that. Like you can totally make it look so fair just by, watch, you push over the card, they see you coming to grab it, and then the wrist turns like that, right? So if I do that at regular speed, you'll see the cards over here. I like to do that sometimes. If I think people are getting suspicious, I'll push the card over, I'll be like, no, look, really. And it'll give you the impression that you saw me just take it like this, even though there's a slight moment where the deck goes out of sight. People won't even notice, and it's super strong. So in terms of uses and other ideas, I first wanted to mention on how to practice the second deal. So if you have the little mirror and it's somewhere you can set up kind of in front of you, and you can just go and deal, that's great. Otherwise, use like a phone with where you have a screen and you can see yourself dealing. So what I like to do is first I'll do this drill where I deal fair, second, fair, second, fair, second, fair, second, right? And I'll just keep going like that over and over and just until I make sure that, you know, I cannot see the difference. Recording yourself is a great added benefit because watching it back later, you can critique yourself better than just doing it in the mirror and critiquing yourself as you go. Another thing, I wouldn't deal into piles too much. Like obviously there are some situations where you are dealing in a pile and you might be second dealing into a pile, but also make sure you practice dealing you know, to a table scenario. That's very important. And it's nice to, what I like to do is pick, so say I'm dealing like a 5-card hand and I'll pick, okay, hand 3 is where I'm second dealing, right? I'll go around and hit a second deal every time there. And then when you know other false deals, you can alternate. Every pile's a different deal. That's one thing I like to do. So record yourself. That's probably your best bet, and make sure you don't only practice second dealing. Yes, it's nice to be able to hit a bunch of consecutive second deals, but you want to be able to integrate them freely without thinking about it between fair, second, fair, second, fair, second, fair, second. So one thing with the strike that can be tricky is pulling that card out. Sometimes it can be tough. So you'll get cards that you go to pull and they don't come with you. You'll get, sometimes you put too much pressure and you get too many cards. So yeah, if you're getting too many cards, it's because you're applying too much pressure and you're pulling off two, and then usually this finger underneath will grab both of them. But if you're not getting it, it's not usually because you're not applying enough pressure. What it usually is just a grip issue. If your hands get too dry, this can be a bit of a problem because it'll come and you just won't even be able to pull the card out at all. So adding a little bit of moisture, whether that's kind of just rubbing your hands together, kind of warming them up, or a tiny little bit of water and then drying it off. Even there's like some people, like if you wipe your forehead, you got a little bit of oil or something, you can kind of get that grip back. So if you know you're gonna have to hit a bunch of consecutive second deals, that's a good idea just to get a little bit of moisture just to make sure that thumb is ready to go. So one of my favorite uses of the second deal is as a force, because it's such a fair force, right? So how you'd use it as a force is you get your force card to the top of the deck, and then you just say, tell me when to stop whenever you want, right? And you just start hitting second deals. So face up, right? I'm just hitting second deals. And then they call stop. And at this point, the nice thing is I say, are you sure, right? Like, do you really want to stop here? Do you want one more? They say one more. It's easy. We just take another one, and then you literally hand the deck out to them and let them pick up this top card, right? A lot of people would expect, or a lot of laymen at least would expect, that you'd be doing regular deals, and then when they come to take the card, that's when you do the false deal. But no, you're doing every other one a false deal. So then it seems super fair when they just get to take that top card, even though it's never changing. So that's a great use of the second deal as a force. I just want to show you guys that I am using borderless cards. So borderless cards don't have the white border around, and that obviously does help hide the false dealings when you don't have a border, because the cards kind of blend together. But no worries, it's totally the exact same with bordered cards. It doesn't change anything. It's equally as deceptive, as you can see. So I just wanted to make a quick comment on that. Just make sure your hands come together, you do the eye line thing, because obviously it's quite a bit more evident when you do it. If you leave the face pointing straight on, it's quite a bit more evident with borderless cards. So you just need to have a nice marriage of the cards. You can still do this thing where you push over slowly and make them feel like you're clearly showing the tops of the cards, even though you're doing a quick action like this. So like I said, I like to do that if people are getting suspicious that maybe I'm not fair dealing. I can just come and say, look, I push it over and I take it like that, and it just looks super fair. So a few small variations of the second deal. You could do a stud second deal. So a stud deal is when you're coming and you're flipping the card face up as you deal, and you're flipping it away from you. I believe that one's the stud. I'm pretty sure that one's the stud. If I'm wrong, I apologize. So you can totally do this with the second deal. It's really exactly the same thing. You come, you grab with the thumb, and then you pull, and as you put it down, you just flip the hand face up and you deal the cards, right? So you can totally do this stud second deal really nicely. And that's another good thing to use with the force, because you can show them that each time the card is changing as you're going through, so they really have any choice they want, but really you've just held the force card on top. There is the other version of flipping a card where you flip it towards you first. So instead of flipping it this way, you're flipping it this way. And you can do that as well with a second deal. So normally when you're doing that with a card, you're grabbing it with the middle finger and the thumb underneath. So it's kind of the opposite grip and you're flipping face up. So second deal, same thing. You're just using the middle finger. Instead of here, you're coming here. And it's a little bit more difficult, but it is doable in case you guys were interested. All right, guys, that is it from me. That is the second deal. One of my favorite moves. I love false deals so much. Practice this because it does deserve a lot of practice. It might seem easy to some of you, especially with some of the tips I've given and not needing to worry about that brief size, but it's important that it matches your fair deal and you can switch between them no problem and you can't tell the difference. So work on that. I give you a lot of ideas, a lot of subtleties on how to improve it, how to make it match your fair deal. Some of the things I did when I was trying to get it to match. And it's funny because I think this is the best way to second deal because of how much obviously it matches your fair deals, how deceptive it is. but it's also probably the easiest way to second deal. And so I think people just overcomplicate the second deal a lot. So I'm really glad I got to teach this. I've been seeing a lot of second deal tutorials going up lately, and I've always had some thoughts on this that I wanted to share. So definitely practice this. You'll find a lot of uses for it. There aren't a ton of tricks that like use second deals besides like in a force. The bottom deal is a lot more useful, but that's a lot more difficult. So, you know, I would love to teach the bottom deal, but my style of bottom dealing is very similar to the person I learned it from. I'm sure you guys can guess. And they sell, you know, their bottom deal and how they do it. And it's kind of original to them. So I don't want to, you know, undercut them and teach it, because a lot of my teachings would be very similar to what they teach, because, you know, their method is just so great. And I mean, I have adapted a few small things, but I don't feel at this time it's right for me to teach, but hopefully in the future. But yeah, with all that said, definitely go practice that second deal, get great at it, and use it, because it's a really fun move. And I'm glad I finally got to teach it properly. So please don't forget to subscribe, drop a comment, and I will catch you in the next video.